I can never hear
That's
that
how
from
I'll
not being
start.
available,
That's
Jonathan. I know.
what
It's
I
never
do.
exactly what we're after.
That's the one.
We'll
That's
leave
funny.
off the next one.
Are we good? We're good. All right,
What
then
are
let's
you-
call ourselves to order at 7 o'clock. I'd invite you to join me for the
To
Pledge
be
of Allegiance.
continued.
Yep.
To be continued.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right.
We don't have
All right, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Tim. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is that Stacy? Thanks, Stacy. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous, thank you. Approval of consent agenda. This evening we are approving the minutes from our regular meeting on January 3rd, the budget meeting minutes from January 10th, and the budget meeting minutes from January 12th, as long as accepting a donation from Grin and Barrett Enterprises. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion. Meg?
Thanks, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Sarah. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Audience of citizens. Is there anyone here who would wish to address the board this evening? Hi, please join us at the podium. And if you don't mind stating your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Poach. I'm a resident here in Portland, and I live in the Penfield Hill area of Portland. I'd like to bring up just a little bit of my experience. I'm a state trooper. I've been in law enforcement now for 19 years. I'm also a member of the state's emergency services unit, so I'm the tactical team leader for the West team. I'm also a bomb tech, and I'm also a Navy diver. The reason I'm here tonight is to bring up the topic of having armed security at the high school. We have a retired police officer that has since been hired, and he's a very good candidate for this position. I think that well, he's not a candidate anymore, but having him armed in the school is only gonna assist with the pandemic we're having across the country. And it's a scary world we live in now, and unfortunately, this is the way that we have to. I mean, I don't want to be standing in front of you bringing this topic up, but armed intervention is the leading way to stop any type of issues that are brought to our schools that involve a firearm and or any other type of potential incident. Just for a couple of. I know that's going to be some things that you'd like to hear some numbers on, so I did a little homework. In 2022, K through 12, there was 300 school shootings. So in 2022, there was 300 school shootings in our country. Since 2018, there's been 1,056 people either fatally or seriously injured by firearms in our schools. We have one of the first school shootings in our town right here in 1985. Our gym at the high school is now named after the custodian that lost his life tragically in that event. There's a statute in our state that has been passed by Connecticut General Statute, passed by legislation 10-244 alpha for any retired law enforcement and or current law enforcement officers that are they're allowed to carry a firearm within the school under a working premises. So if they have if they're employed by the school system, under that statute, they are allowed to carry a firearm. So it's not like the state has already passed the statute for us so that law enforcement, retired and or current, can still carry a firearm. I talked with, did some homework with some of the school boards that in our surrounding towns, and I spoke with East Hampton in particular, and they just went through this policy, the same thing that's coming up we're doing right now. They went through the whole thing. They now have armed security in every one of their schools. So does Glastonbury. I'm not looking to ask for armed security in every single one of our schools, but we have a school security officer right now that is retired law enforcement, and he's also potentially keeping his credentials as a certified law enforcement officer through the town of New Britain. So he was actually going to be a certified police officer still and working part-time in New Britain while still maintaining his full-time job here in Portland. To me, that's a home run. So we're actually having a certified, if we look into this further, we're actually having a certified police officer in our school already. That's armed. The cost, I know there's, you know, and I applaud you for the hard work that you do in the budgets and stuff like that, but there really is no cost to this. There's nothing. The training and all the certifications that the security officer would have to maintain are provided for him. It'd be provided, his certifications as a police officer would be provided by the town that he's employed, which would be New Britain. And there's also, if he does intend to retire, the state provides training for him to maintain his any type of firearms training and qualifications that he would have to maintain. East Hampton is willing to share their entire policy with us, and they'll email it right over to us at no problem whatsoever. I already contacted them and kind of line that up so we can kind of look through that if we're willing to take a look at it and see how it looks and how it would fit into our town potentially. And that's really all I have. Do you have any questions or anything like that? I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but it's pretty much a straightforward topic.
Thank you for addressing the board, Jeff. The way a public comment works at our Board of Ed meetings is we're not really permitted to ask questions or
Gotcha.
to give any feedback in this
Okay.
moment, but we take everything you've shared with us into consideration and may choose to address it at a future meeting.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
great.
So if there's anything else you wish to share with the board, we're here to listen.
No, I mean, again, I don't want to be standing here. This is a pandemic that's, you know, raging across our country. And for us, the best course, where we can put all the money into trying to secure the schools ourselves as much as we want. But the students still carry bags into schools. They conceal firearms in their garments. They carry firearms into our schools. There was an incident in 2021 where a student brought a firearm into one of our schools. We could research the police report for that, but there was an incident of a firearm already being brought into our school just a little over a year ago. Not this current school's year, but the year prior. So this does happen. We're not immune to it, and I just hope we can move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any additional public comment online?
No, that's just fine.
Thank you. All right, Portland Public Schools Spotlight. I understand there's nothing on the agenda for tonight, but we will be hearing from DECA in February, correct?
Correct, yeah, and we have others lined up.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Our student representative report is up next. We have our student reps with us. Fabulous. Good evening.
Hi.
Hi.
So 2 weeks ago, PHS had rescheduled their Spirit Day and Pep Rally. The events included Rap a Teacher, where each class got to rap a teacher head to toe with rap paper. There was a pie eating contest between each of the classes and a candy cane relay race. And then lastly, there was a pie a teacher rap contest.
And then during the pep rally, we also recognized all the winter sports this year. And then that same day, we had a spirit day, so everybody wore their red and black, and a lot of people participated in that.
Excellent. Thank you both for the update. Are there any questions for our student representatives? No? All right, thank you. Communications and updates. Dr. Britton, you are up.
Sure, all right, I have a couple of things to share. So I just put in your board packets tonight the resumes of two individuals who I'm really excited to welcome to our schools. Both of them are just outstanding. So the first is Jillian McGinley, right? So Jillian, some of you may know, she grew up here in Portland and went off to the University of Rhode Island and is now a speech and language pathologist. So We're very, very fortunate and delighted to welcome Jillian as our speech and language pathologist. As you know, for the past several months, we've been contracting with Cheshire Fitness. So Jillian is going to be starting up with us February 1st. Cheshire Fitness did a wonderful job. They're a very high-quality outfit. We're blessed to have them in many respects, but it's also wonderful to have our own person in-house. So Dawn did send out an email welcoming Jillian, interviewed her last week. She's fabulous. I've rarely seen transcripts as good as hers. I don't know if she's hearing me, but she clearly worked very hard at the University of Rhode Island, and I'm really excited to welcome her home. She is a resident here of Portland, went through our schools, and it's always great when we have people that went through our schools and went off and did great things and then are back to continue giving to our community. The second individual whose resume I included with your packet is Brianna Paskowitz. Again, she's a newer teacher. It's going to be her about halfway through her second year. We're very excited to welcome her. She is going to be our new life skills teacher. So as you know, our current life skills teacher is moving on to pursue other leadership opportunities. Wish her all the best of luck, but am very excited to welcome Brianna. She's going to be wrapping up in her current school over the next couple of weeks and starting with us in February. So two very important additions to our support services faculty in Jillian and Brianna. Feel free to visit, say hello to them if you see them around. Otherwise, I'm delighted to welcome them to our schools.
Great, that's excellent. And when does the new speech and language pathologist start?
February 1st.
February 1st.
And I think it's like February 9th.
Okay.
She had to wrap up some things in her current school for Brianna.
That's
So
great.
very, very happy to have them on board.
Was that something that was sent, because I don't see it anywhere?
It's in your board package. I just put it in there tonight.
Oh, so we wouldn't have any way to know to look for it?
No,
Yeah.
here they are if you want to take a look.
Oh, sure.
They have terrific CV. So a couple of other things I had an experience this past Friday that I want to share with the board. And it was the first time I got to do this as the superintendent. So the past couple of years, because of COVID, I've been doing a lot of these things remotely, which I don't know what to say, just didn't have the same effect. But this past Friday in the morning, I was down at Learn on the Shoreline. I was at what's called a legislative breakfast. This is the first one I got to attend in person. It was all of the area superintendents and our legislatures. Senator Needleman was there and others. I wish I'd written down a list of the representatives that were there, but there were about a half dozen representatives there. And then in the afternoon, of course, I attended a Middlesex area superintendent's discussion, and we kind of had a nice follow-up, talked a little bit about some of the legislative agendas. I want to just share some of the things that were spoken about there, and I also shared in your board packets the CABE legislative update. These are the things that CABE is advocating for, which very much aligned with what the superintendents were advocating for. I want to just talk about these things with you, let you know what they were saying, and answer any questions I have, so that there's a couple of layers of this. One, the issues that were discussed at this legislative breakfast were very much the issues that we are living through here in Portland. We are not an island. We are very much a part of a statewide community. And we know we're going to be hearing a lot more about these things as the legislative session gets underway. Some of these things have very important implications in terms of our budget and policy and working conditions. So I just want to let you know some of what was discussed. Now, I want to be honest. As the kind of new guy in the room, I sort of sat back and did a lot of listening. I didn't do a lot of contributing, but I got a lot out of the discussion and took some notes. Certainly as I, become a little bit more seasoned in this position, I will likely speak up, but I did a lot of listening. The conversation was fascinating. Several of the superintendents, some of whom are longtime superintendents and very well respected, shared with the legislators some observations and concerns. I would characterize one of the primary concerns as a shift that some of our towns are feeling towards the expectation that districts behave in a way driven by compliance rather than coherence, right? There's a sense out there that we're starting to get a little bit more top-down in the state than we might like to see, and there's a desire amongst the superintendents to make sure that boards of education and superintendents are consulted before some of these changes show up in policy updates and legislative actions. And then one of the things, of course, that was pointed to as an example was the change to a 30-minute lunch at the last minute, right? Nobody knew that was coming, and I don't know that anybody would necessarily say that isn't necessarily a bad idea, but, to have that kind of handed to us as a, hey, you need to do this, was an example that was expressed of, hey, it would have been better if, this had been brought to us and had been more fully vetted and not just stuffed into some legislation and given to us in the summer after we've already built our schedules and negotiated our contracts and put our budgets together. The other example that was sort of pointed to, although this was a little bit more in the open, although it did come out quickly, was the new reading legislation. The expectation that we very quickly adjust to some new reading programs without a lot of input into that process. And the feedback that the superintendent shared was that we need more time, right? As you know, that for us, we did ask for the waiver. Our waiver is driven by fiscal needs. We have not budgeted for any professional development or new programs. The other waiver, of course, would be if you want to keep your existing reading program because you want to make the argument that it works. That's a very high bar they've set for the data you have to present and arguments you have to make. But there was definitely some frustration amongst the superintendents that was shared with the legislators that came with an ask that more time be given to this process so we can do it more thoughtfully and not so knee-jerk. In 1 year is not quite enough time to replace an entire reading curriculum. And then, of course, it was very much shared some of the frustrations about CT SEDS. Superintendents very vocally shared some of that frustration, although most people around the table were recognizing that it is getting better. Right? So it was a tough start. We're starting to get used to it. A lot of the bugs have been worked out of the program. But again, nested within some of that feedback was more time. Right? That has happened very quickly. Maybe needed another year of beta testing and piloting before we had to jump in with both feet. Other pieces of advocacy work, clearly the superintendents gave feedback to the legislators to continue to make sure that ECS formula is fully funded. There's a new formula out there. If that formula were to take away funding from any towns, that there's a whole ask for hold harmless, but certainly it's more funding through the ECS that legislators very clearly heard from the superintendents, along with a request that the cap on excess cost sharing be removed. Then there was some very positive feedback for the mental health funding and for the HVAC funding, although with both of those, with the mental health, it was we need more. It shouldn't necessarily be grant funded, it should be an entitlement. And also with the HVAC, clearly the legislators heard what we experienced here was things like, hey, allow us to use our ESSER funding as a matching contribution. That would have been helpful. But there was definitely feedback that support for mental health and improved indoor air quality was appreciated and something that the superintendents would like to see continue. Also, there was some rich discussion about what steps districts can take to recruit and retain high-quality teachers. There's lots of discussion happening now about the teacher shortage that's looming out there and what we need to do at the local and state level to make sure that Connecticut continues to recruit, hire, retain the most highly qualified teachers we can, and whether that's reciprocity with certification, incentives for people to go into the profession, and then how we can make sure that we respect our educators and compensate them at levels that will keep them in the profession. That was some of the feedback that went from the superintendents to the legislators. And then what was interesting is the legislators got to give some feedback to the superintendents. They got to ask some questions. And I gleaned from their questions some really interesting things that sort of gave me the camel's nose into what is being talked about at Hartford. The legislators were very curious what local districts are doing to recruit and retain teachers and what our recommendations would be for us to increase the pool of teachers, particularly a more diverse educator workforce. There's also discussion about what superintendents would recommend might be included in something called a teacher's bill of rights. Some of the feedback legislators have gotten from teachers is that they're feeling a little abused, a little bit put upon, a little stressed these days with some things, and there is a desire to make sure teachers are respected in the profession and supported. And then within that was some really interesting discussion about if we're going to make sure teachers stay in the profession, how are they supported when it comes to the management of student conduct? So legislators have gotten some feedback from teachers in some districts that teachers aren't feeling necessarily supported, and that some of the behaviors in the classroom that are particularly challenging, they need help managing. Right? I think that this clearly reflects back to things like mental health support, but also some of the legislators were asking questions about the efficacy of things like restorative practices, and what are we doing with things like SBDI, and are some of these newer approaches to relationship building perceived as more effective than what I might call old school discipline. So it was a really interesting conversation. I think a lot of that conversation is clearly matched with what you see in CABE's legislative agenda, but I have a strong suspicion that that is what you're going to hear an awful lot about this legislative session. Each of those things, all of which are important, none of which are easy or have any quick solutions to them. But I thought I would share that with you and would be happy to answer any questions about some of that.
Were there any members of the education committee and again, you don't?
Yes, there was one,
Okay.
and I've forgotten, I didn't write down the name.
Okay, that's okay.
So,
But those are the voices that we really want to talk to. So, yeah.
yep.
CABE is meeting with some people this week up at the, so we'll see how that goes. And then we have legislative breakfast in all the regions. Ours is tomorrow morning down at Deep River, which is the Region 8. And a lot of times the legislators don't come, unfortunately, but 2 or 3 will, and there's a good rich discussion about what Board of Ed members are also feeling in terms of unfunded mandates that skew our budgets and send us all reeling through, for sure. So, yeah, it's going to be a combined effort of superintendents and board members to reel this in.
And teachers, for sure.
And teachers, well, we need to listen to teachers for sure, because they are on the front line.
It's all really interesting. Are there any other questions for Charles about his, about what he just shared? No. All right.
Thanks for getting your feedback.
It was
Yeah,
fascinating.
that's great.
Yeah, it was
That's great.
fascinating.
Did you have anything else for us
That's
this
all.
evening? All right, and item B, Stephanie, you're up.
So in closed, I apologize that it didn't come until today. This is a quarterly report. The funny thing is this is kind of backdated. You know, in the first board meeting I gave in January, I gave through that point of time, and this is through December. So, you know, I know it's still the quarterly report, so I still did it. So the numbers may look a little different than the report I gave in January. Really, noted in my memo, the deficit positions are the same accounts that I talk about every time. Now with the hiring of the speech and language pathologist, hopefully purchase services will go in the other direction. I want to also rephrase some things from last time when I was talking about being in a deficit. I know it doesn't look like we're in a deficit, so I want to say that projecting with what we have for salaries and anticipated expenses at the time is what I was saying is what would be if we went into a deficit. I'm monitoring all the accounts, and like I said, hopefully with the hiring of the new teacher, and we still don't know what the reimbursement for excess cost is going to be, the percentage. I think our first deposit is in February, so I'll have a better idea then. I keep looking online to see, and it's not saying yet. So once I get a better idea what that will be in February, you know, I'll have a better picture of how, you know, other things could play out. Same thing with open choice. We haven't gotten the final number for that as well. I mean, I know we have 70, but there's additional funds we get depending on if you have a certain amount of kids in the same grade or the same class. You get additional funds for that as well. So every little bit helps. But like I said, it doesn't look like we're in a deficit. I'm just projecting a deficit. That doesn't mean next month I can come back and say we're doing great. So really all the accounts that I touched upon in the memo are the ones that I'm really following, especially gas. Bob and I were looking at the gas bills today, trying to figure out why there was such a large increase in our most recent December bill. He's going to look into it. I think we came to the conclusion that they were estimating a couple of months, and then they're finally catching up to that estimating, and that's why it was such a large kind of jump. this month, but I guess we'll see, he's gonna do a little research and.
You think that jump was actually, in
Catching
reality,
up.
spread over multiple months of usage?
Right, and, you know, looking as the payments come in, and, you know, I wondered in my head, why are these payments the exact same amount every month? Not even thinking that they're estimated. And then all of a sudden, we get a $7,000 bill, and I'm like,
Right.
that's not good. So Bob's gonna do a little research, and we're hoping that that, you know, catches us up through December, and then now going forward will be accurate. So again, that's just an account I'm gonna watch. But, you know, we're halfway through the year, 50% is the, you know, the key percent that we want on the side. And I just plug along every single day and try to get us, you know, into a good spot. I don't know if anybody has any questions about, like I said, it's like a few weeks behind from what I gave last time, so it's hard.
I saw a few accounts where we had less of a percentage as of December 31st than we did compared to last school year that you didn't address in your memo, so I was just curious to hear your thoughts on 23004, which is retirement severance.
So, we had 2 employees that retired mid-year at this point, so they had their payout already.
Got
If you
it.
look at last year, there was no expenses yet.
Yeah.
So that means that there was no payouts yet.
Okay.
And another thing that will change the percentage is if the budget increases or decreases.
Mhm.
So if you see in 2021 or 21-22, you know, it could have gone up $100,000, but like how I said in, I forget which one it was, that we cut in gas.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
we ended in a $17,000 deficit, we cut 25,000, we added back in 5,000, but we're still in deficit. So you have to look at the budget number and then the actual expenses to be able to compare the two.
Right. And then probably a similar situation with unemployment compensation, 28001.
Yep.
But electricity, 62001.
Yep.
I'm curious, is that something to be concerned about?
So I'm pretty sure that we already outsourced the supplier to another company, so I don't believe Eversource is our supplier. Do you know that, Bob?
Yeah, there's two sides of it. It's the delivery charge where you can outsource. I'm not sure, I know that we looked at 2 last year, and Tom might have signed, I believe we did.
I think I have to go back and look at the bills.
So we are kind of in a fixed situation
Right.
for one of those charges.
So most of the bills right now are only paid through December, so once January comes, and I'll go back and look, I'm pretty sure because when I look at the bills, I'm pretty sure they say a different supplier name, or whatever the one that went up.
Okay.
So, and we also did all of the light energy projects, so we should be seeing some savings in there. However, we do have, a payment that we have to pay back also, like a loan. So those are in the bills as well. So, you know, where there may be some savings in some area, they did go up because we did add in at Valley View, Gildersleeve, and a small one at the high school, the energy upgrades.
And that was a 3-year,
Right.
like a 3-year loan.
Yep.
After 3 years, we'd be realizing more savings.
More
in
savings, yep.
electricity.
So I think the monthly payments are about $1,700 each at Gildersleeve and, Valley View, and then the high school is under $100.
Okay. And last question,
Mhm.
56006, do we have no tuition to magnet schools this year?
As of right now, we don't.
Okay.
Those would be any kind of special ed services, if we have students that are outplaced at a magnet school. So
Okay.
as of right now, we do not have any.
Okay, so that's not any, where is it accounted for any tuition we're paying to students that have opted out of our district?
Yeah, so I apologize, I didn't mean outplacements, I meant in our CREC schools, or
Mhm.
it's CREC Learn, ACES, I think those are the 3 where most of our students go to. And as of right now, we do not have any charges. That doesn't mean we may not going forward, but as of right now, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a question. Last time we talked about projections for this year, you had talked about a number like 400,000 that looked like we might have a short, and I understand that was all perspective based on the picture you were looking at the time, but it sounds like that picture's changed somewhat now. I mean, do you have another number for us besides the 400,000?
I don't, I won't know until the speech person gets hired, because I don't know how much back hours we still have to fill with Cheshire Fitness, so I can't be like, okay, we're cut off January 31st, going forward, it's only gonna be this. So I don't know, I have to, you know, figure all that out, as far as that goes. And
We will be maintaining the relationship with Cheshire Fitness for
if they
an
have to,
undetermined amount of time to finish up
I would think, John could probably answer that better, but I would think so. I don't think they can just drop off if they're in the middle
I'm
of a
sure they have
caseload or
to.
something that they have to finish
There has to
doing
be
what
a
they were doing.
transition of some
Yeah.
sort.
Right. And also too, when the excess costs, like I said, I'm only projecting at 75%. If we get 86% like last year, that'll help also. So until I know those numbers, I mean, technically it's still about 400,000.
So that's still,
As of right now, but like I
Possible,
said,
yeah.
until those, the person's on board, we cut the other, when we're having some athletic trainer problems again, trying to get an athletic trainer, so, that might get reduced a little bit. Everything changes every day.
right, we have a couple of hopeful things on the horizon.
Yes, I'm
which is-
a little more hopeful than I was before.
It's good to hear.
We like it when Stephanie's hopeful.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Stephanie?
No. All right, Stephanie, thank you very much.
And remember, we do still have that little bit of buffer too in the ESSER funds if it came down to it.
If we need it. All right.
But we're using a good portion of that for the next budget year, right? So we have
Right.
less than,
Well, we have at least 89,000, and then with
Right.
the mental health grant, fingers crossed,
if we
we'll have
would
more.
get that, right?
So again.
It's a lot of
we have
ifs.
A lot of ifs, yes.
A lot of it.
It's a lot of ifs. All right. Thank you. All right. Hello, Eric.
Hi, I'm podium ready.
Excellent. Our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology.
Good evening, everyone. I assume everyone received a copy of my report in the board packet. Here to field any questions about any particulars in the report.
There was a lot in here. Do you want to highlight anything for us this evening?
Well, let's start, since we're on the topic of budget. We did have our SBDI Year 2 grant approved, $27,500. Again, the goals of the School-Based Diversion Initiative are to reduce exclusionary discipline measures, suspensions, and expulsions, to reduce calls to 911, and to increase calls to 211. So we were awarded Year 2 funding based on meeting goal thresholds according to those 3 areas last year. Year 2 funding is a little bit less than it was last year, which we anticipated, but as you can see, what we've itemized to spend that money on, there's some really exciting things in there. I would especially like to draw attention to the community event we're offering to our secondary parents, Ryan's story, which again comes from an educational consultant speaker, John Halligan, and as indicated in my report, it's about helping parents especially recognize signs of bullying, cyberbullying, socially exclusive behavior, trouble signs in their children that they'll be better positioned to intervene and to inform us so that we could provide intervention services and supports in our building. And then that's happening next Thursday night in the secondary auditorium, followed right on the heels of that on Friday with a similar presentation to students, a student-facing presentation about the dangers of bullying and how to assist, for students to assist others, and also to seek help when needed along those lines. Just flipping through, I want to thank Dr. Britton, Assistant Principal Cardona, and our Food Service Director, John White. They're taking a lead in reestablishing our Wellness Committee, which is in alignment with state policy, but just a really good idea. And as a consequence of that work, we're going to be really robustly revisiting health curriculum. Health is something that we don't start formally teaching right now in Portland until 5th grade. And we believe that there's good reason to start that education earlier. Healthy body choices, healthy dietary choices, healthy physical activity choices. And so we're excited to breathe new life into our health curriculum.
Eric, can I just comment on that briefly?
Yeah.
Part of the reason we're doing that work, the new board members, is we are way behind in the adoption of a new wellness policy. Right? And our policy committee has been, we kind of kicked the can on it because of COVID, and we were focused on lots of issues of health and wellness that had to do with stopping a virus and that type of thing. And the work Eric and Frank and John Hipshire and I with the PE team are doing is we're making sure that our practices are up to alignment with the policy, so that when we bring you the policy, after being vetted through the policy committee, it's ready for prime time. You know, it's not, it's always bad practice when you adopt a policy and then try to catch your practices up to it, because once you adopt the policy, that's the expectation. So what we're trying to do is get our practices in place before we move forward with the policy. But my goal is to have that done by the end of this year, so that we can spend some time this spring and summer looking at that CAVE model policy and hopefully having it to you, if not this summer, spring, then by the fall. But that's something that we on the policy committee have been arm wrestling with now for
We've
what,
been-
2
yes,
years?
2 years, yeah, it's, a
We're
lot.
gonna get there.
And the curriculum work is really timely. At the tail end of last school year, with very little fanfare, the state released a new healthy and balanced living curriculum framework. So it's
They did.
a good opportunity to realign our curriculum and our approach to health and physical education to that new curriculum framework and those standards. And our PE teachers are excited for the work. I'll also just highlight the K-3 early literacy legislation was referenced here. We are taking a very strategic approach to that legislation. We've applied for a financial extension waiver. There's obviously a financial reality, but we're also looking for time to build in a democratic process in which we allow our teachers to see these materials, to put hands to these materials, and to help us make an informed choice as to what's best for kids. And in this board report, I outlined a process that we'll be utilizing on our February 17th PD day with teachers to allow them to do just that. The worst thing you can do is, you know, ivory tower, pick a program and foist it onto teachers, especially lower elementary teachers who are very, very passionate about teaching literacy and teaching children how to read. So as we consider them our experts, we're excited to be giving them the opportunity to lend their expertise to what's a critical decision for the district moving forward. And then I will just also, well, 2 other things quickly. I did note here that we have taken a pause with our District Equity and Inclusion Coalition, and I just want to speak to that for a moment. This is in no way signaling intent of disbanding that coalition or stopping our work. We've just been, since we passed the district equity statement, kind of struggling to find our feet with what's next. And we've been continuing to have good meetings, but also hearing from coalition members that they want to feel that our work is of a little bit more impact, making a little bit more live, actual difference for students and families in the community. So we're just taking a pause to gather feedback from our coalition, figure out the best way forward with the intent, again, of relaunching in February. So we pushed out that survey to existing coalition members today. We're going to be following that up with gathering what we call street level data from some of our students that can guide our work moving forward. So I know, I thank the board for their continued support of that coalition, especially, as reflected in the equity statement that we worked really hard on and passed together, adopted together, and that still maintains all of its good potential that we'll build upon moving forward.
Eric, can I ask really quickly, are you, before you relaunch in February, are you working to recruit more community members or students or additional participants, or are you really working with the members that you already have?
Both. So in the survey, we asked meeting logistics questions. Best time of day to meet, best day of the week to meet, virtual or in person. In actuality, we had a lot better attendance when we were virtual. And I think we all came out of COVID like, if I never attend another virtual meeting in my life, I'll be glad. But now coming kind of back to the middle, the pendulum swings back to the middle. There is a place for virtual meetings, and if that's going to be the difference of getting a really robust level of participation and varied representation on the coalition, then that may be our best way forward, and we would recruit into that possibility. And then finally, I put some website statistics down. So our curriculum website has been live for a little bit over a month just now, a day or two over a month. And in those past 30 days, we've had 158 visitors access the site, and those visitors have generated 3,241 page hits. So when I look at that in the first month of its existence, we're really happy with those statistics. I would venture to say that was 158 people that some of whom already had interest in accessing our curriculum, and very likely some that would have not even known that curriculum existed for public viewing. So we're happy to be getting that information out to the public, available, continuously updated, and something that we can build upon through family partnerships moving forward.
Awesome.
Are there questions for Eric about anything that he presented or anything that was in his lengthy update?
Everything looks good.
I did my survey, just by the way.
Oh, awesome. Can I ask a quick question? While I'm at the podium, there's, under new business, there's 2 items. Do we have to follow it in that order, or can we, I can stay at the podium and do cybersecurity now with Dylan, if that helps to expedite? Not that we're trying to rush Dylan.
I don't have a problem with swapping them, but I did have just a quick question first before we move on
Sure
from
thing.
this. Would you just refresh my memory, the SBDI grant, is it just a 2-year grant, or is there a 3rd year of funding on this one? We don't know.
Potential for 3rd year funding, they're always looking to expand the grant.
Okay.
We are one of the first non-alliance districts to partner with SBDI, so that represents just a shift in how they're partnering and allocating grant money, so we will certainly stump for year 3 funding.
Yeah.
We're using a lot of our year 2 money with the intent of, okay, if SBDI grant goes away at the end of this year, how have we built our capacity to continue the work moving forward? And that's why you see some of the train-the-trainer model in our
Right.
administrator training coming through with the funding.
I was particularly excited to see I mean, all of it just sounds like a really wonderful use of these funds. What a gift. But I was particularly excited about the administrator trainings and coming out of the budget process and knowing that all of our funding for administrator professional development was slashed for this coming budget year, and how it's pulling at my heart that happens, that's happening in this budget. It's exciting to see that you're, through what I know is a lot of work going after these additional grant funds, to be able to use some of that to fund that this year makes me hopeful that maybe there'll be additional funds to provide some of that to our administrators.
Yeah, so a couple of things. In regards to the administrator funding being cut within the PD line, that in some ways is above and beyond money in that it's meant to fund administrator participation at things like national conferences or heavier price tag admin PD. That's really important, right? That's certainly worth the money. We will find a way to provide administrators the PD that they need to continue to move their buildings forward. We try to keep that money separate from what we consider the teacher pot of PD money, and we would always prioritize teacher professional learning needs above administrators. It's that much closer to students, but where administrator PD is critical to the success of our buildings and our students, we'll find the money.
Yeah. Well, I appreciated seeing that in here, and it's great.
And then there is a well-established precedent in Portland that when a Portland Public Schools educator attends a professional learning event and receives a training, be it a teacher or an administrator, the expectation is that they come back and do what we call share the goods, turnkey it to their peers. And our administrators do this all the time. Like, they come back excited, wanting to share their learning, wanting to share their training. So I know the 3 secondary administrators that we're going to train in restorative practices will do the same for their other administrative peers.
That's great. Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Any other questions about this document? Thank you. I continue to really like this format for updates. It's just, I don't know, I love being able to read it ahead of time. It's great.
Long may it continue.
All right, so if everyone's comfortable with swapping items A and B under new business, we can move ahead with the Portland High School course proposal for cybersecurity while we have Eric up at the podium. And then we'll come back around to the Middletown Stage Company.
So as Dylan Bernard joins me, the course proposal is really his, so I'm going to defer to him in a moment, other than to explain to the board that this was the first implementation of a new process for course proposals that function through the Board of Education Curriculum Subcommittee. So working with our administrators, I put together a course or program request or proposal form that the Portland Public Schools teacher or educator that's proposing a new course or program fills out the form. It's got a ton of important information as you see it in front of you there. And then that form goes to the Board of Education Curriculum Subcommittee members ahead of our meeting. And then the individual or individuals who completed that form then also attend the next upcoming Board of Education Curriculum Subcommittee meeting to field any questions or concerns about information that was or wasn't on the proposal form. So, trying to remember the date, it was was our January meeting. No, this is January. It was our December meeting.
yeah.
Sorry, it was our December meeting. Dylan and Principal Lawson attended our Board of Education Curriculum Subcommittee, presented to the subcommittee the information that's on the form. And the subcommittee then makes a recommendation moving forward to the Board of Education for consideration of this course. And so Dylan is here to answer any additional questions. We're asking that the Board of Education take action on the matter tonight. And just as an aside, from a curriculum standpoint, our position in Portland is that to offer a course to students, it has been approved by the Board of Education, requisite. I then will work with the teacher or teachers who are running that course to prepare enough of a curriculum to allow them to be successful in launching that course, understanding that as they continue to teach the course, they will continue to build the curriculum through the development of lessons and activities and assessments for students. So it's not that we need to have a fully fleshed out curriculum before the course runs. We just need to have accounted for how we build out a skeletal curriculum enough to prepare us for successfully launch the course. With that said, happy to turn it over to Dylan.
If I could just ask before, because the form is blank on that area, but it did go to the curriculum committee?
It did,
And what was
yes.
the date? It kind of blew by me with the date.
The
What was
curriculum committee,
I can give you the
had this
exact date.
proposal at our December meeting.
So December.
Yep, and we made the recommendation after discussion that this move forward and come to the full board.
Did
And
you
I
guys review-
apologize, that form is blank because page 3 got lost in an email shuffle, and so I re-signed and resubmitted page 3 and didn't fill in that bottom.
December 21st.
December 21st.
Oh, okay.
Yes, right before.
And they had the same material we have here?
Yes.
Same exact
It's the
form.
same,
Put a
okay.
bow on it.
With the exception again of that third signature page. I botched that.
And was there a budgetary impact on this? Oh, I see here $520
There
for
was,
materials.
and I had planned for it when we planned out the budget for this year, so it was in Principal Lawson's current budget. So it's not an additional cost that we hadn't planned for.
Typically, course offerings at the high school are governed in accordance with the development of the program of studies. So the program of studies comes out around February to support student course selection. A course description like cybersecurity goes into the program of studies even before Board of Education approval, but carries the stipulation pending Board of Education approval and sufficient enrollment. And that's always the condition for new courses. This form is just formalizing the process such that we have greater consistency over time. So in Dylan's case, this was, a train he wanted coming down the tracks for a long time and was able to budget accordingly with Principal Lawson.
Part of it started from when I taught cybersecurity through DHS, and then I was accepted to the Gen Cyber program last summer, which is really what gave me the foundation for all the content and the training and whatnot. So we've been working on this since then.
That's great.
One additional question, how does this impact any other instructional time in place for this current year or any other responsibilities that you have?
As far as my teaching load, currently my department is looking at a little bit of reshuffling as we look at our overall courses. So it won't impact much of my current teaching assignment. This year I'm teaching, for example, a materials processing course, which will then just return to the other tech ed teacher, who is in his restructuring of his stuff, as we're aligning to colleges and whatnot. He was able to collapse one of his courses into 2. So it's not going to impact anything that we weren't ready to evolve or collapse.
Okay, great. In the future, that perhaps could be something to add to the form, because it'd probably be a question that would come up for
Sure.
future too. Thank you.
Good point.
Is there, many other schools in the state that are offering this? And, I see that the curriculum, you've kind of gonna parallel this ring curriculum. You don't have to come up with it yourself, it's pretty standardized.
Yep, so when I went through the Gen Cyber program, the goal for the University of New Haven was to create a community of AP computer science teachers, tech ed teachers, math teachers, who were teaching computer science. The goal was for them to implement lessons into courses that already existed or develop a standalone course, which is kind of where we stood since we already had an AP computer science principles. With that, we've kind of kept community. They provided a ton of resources, the ring being one of them. So as I was developing my skeleton, I pretty much had a lot of the work that we did as a group, which involved writing lessons and coming up with activities through that summer camp, and fleshing it out with what Ring has. The Ring curriculum is a full year program, so I would kind of cherry pick what related to what we did in Gen Cyber with some of the concepts that I did with VHS to get the intro to cybersecurity course.
The state published new computer science standards 3 years ago, and in the wake of those standards has been working with area universities and community colleges to increase the number of dual enrollment computer science courses available to high school students through pretty aggressive grant funding, and the program through University of New Haven is an example of that.
In our curriculum meeting, you were able to speak to the way that the new cybersecurity course and our AP computer science course will kind of build on each other and align with one another, and so I thought maybe the board would benefit from hearing about that a little bit.
Sure. And since then, Corey Toussaint and I have been working with the Shift to Power School and kind of what we want our CTE department to look like. So he has a communications and computer science course down at the middle school that he runs. So starting next year, my communications branch of CTE is actually going to transition over to communications and computer science. So that way it has the cybersecurity piece in it on the pathway that would then connect to AP computer science principles, as well as his, I think it's 7th grade class that he has at the middle school. And then on that pathway as well, I could relate my video game design course that was developed a few years ago that relates some of the same kind of coding concepts and languages and whatnot. So we put all of these courses kind of together on a pathway. Since I started working with the Gen Cyber program, I immediately reached out to Patty, who's the computer science teacher. She shared her syllabus, and we've been working kind of closely to make sure what eventually is in cybersecurity isn't something that's already being done in computer science, that they would complement each other without it being repetitive. And we could build off of it and have it as a true pathway to help increase enrollment in that field.
Sounds good.
And currently, as of today, our whole department was looking at the dual enrollment type of stuff with some of the community colleges. So it's not currently on that proposal as far as getting college credit, but that is one of the courses we are looking at and we'll be working on throughout this year as we continue to develop that further.
It's exciting. It's a great opportunity. Are there additional questions about the cybersecurity course? No? If there are no more questions, I would be happy to entertain a motion.
I'm happy to make a motion to approve the cybersecurity course led by Dylan Bernard at Morton High School. And
Thank you, Meg.
congratulations.
I will second.
Oh,
That's
go ahead,
fine.
Stacy.
Go
I saw
ahead.
Kim's hand.
That's fine.
I'm gonna go with Kim. Any further discussion? Nope. All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you both. This is really exciting opportunity for our students.
We'll hire them.
Great, yeah.
All right, so now we're gonna do our little flip-flop and head to the Middletown Stage Company Summer Program Facilities request.
Logical to the creative, right? So, if you'll remember, last year, right around this time, we entertained a request from the Middletown Stage to rent the Don Gates Auditorium, use the cafeteria mostly for lunch, because we don't want people eating, certainly in the auditorium, and some ensemble rooms and a practice room for a summer theater program. So it's a month-long summer theater program. The first 2 weeks of the theater, they're off-site, and they do all of their rehearsals and practicing, but then they come on-site for the 2 weeks. So it would be 5 days during the weekend, and the 2 weekends, and on the weekends, they do their productions. So they have some matinees and some evening performances. So what I provided you tonight was their request, a facilities use request to use the facilities, and then I provided you an outline of what they're charged, right? And that matches board policy with what the rates are. So we broke it down into essentially two bills, if you will, right? One bill for the first week, which has the multiple productions, and then the second bill for the second week with the 3 productions. Generally speaking, you know, this is our 3rd year in our relationship with the Middletown stage. It's been pretty good. You know, there's always some wrinkles to iron out, but I think we've done a nice job with that. You know, and now we have a good working relationship with them. They've been very responsive to our needs and requests, and I'm happy to support this proposal go forward and answer any questions.
I have a question. When, on the pages here, it says quotation number 3 and quotation number 4. Were there, is like 1 and 2 like last year when they did it? Do we know? Is that?
Yeah, you know what, that might have been, last year we probably had quotation 1, which was the full month, quotation 2, which was the full month, and then quotation 3 and 4 were more for the productions, the performances. Because there's a different rate when you charge, when you use the theater just to rent it versus when you use it for a production. It's $300 versus $700. So what you're seeing there, quote 1 and quote 2, is likely last summer. To be completely honest, last summer, when we gave them the quotes for the whole month, it was cost prohibitive.
Right, I remember that, yeah, they
Right.
weren't able to.
So they redesigned their program, so part of it is off-site, and then they come on-site
Right.
for showtime, right? So these 2 quotes, what you're seeing there, I bet you if I went back, you know, with Jen Gochi, who had these on here, quote 1 and quote 2 were for the first 2 weeks that didn't include the
Yeah.
performances. That's my,
These are these are all inclusive for the 2 weeks, no, it's the 17th to the 21st and
Yeah,
then the
17th.
24th to the 28th.
exactly, yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's good use of the space and brings a little bit of,
Yeah.
of course, we have to pay for people to take care of the space as well.
Yeah, we do, and you know.
There's extra cost, right, for maintenance those days, or?
I believe the extra costs for
It's
maintenance
all-
are built into their
It's all
quote.
built into.
Well, yeah,
the
but some of
quote.
what I mean is some of this fees goes towards paying for the extra costs.
Correct, particularly on those nights when people need to be on 2nd and 3rd shift.
Right.
Right.
So that's where you see some of that.
Right.
But I will say, that the folks in the camp have been very responsive, they kept things neat, they left the place immaculate. I mean, when they strike the sets, they've done a wonderful job. They've earned my confidence, I would say that way.
Good to hear. And it sounded like the wrinkles from the first summer were mostly ironed out, and that last summer was a
They
pretty
were.
smooth
They
experience.
were, I was there and we made sure that, you know, they were held accountable and we stayed out of their way. The summer camp did their thing in the Middletown. And we worked beautifully with transportation because we were picking and dropping kids off at the same time, and the custodial, I think the custodial staff really appreciated Mrs. Cinnacope's efforts to work with them, because that was a big part of the problem. So, no, last summer was beautiful, it
Yeah,
was.
and Mr. Shea was right on top of it, so was Linda Martin and Chuck Hirschon, so we had a lot of people keeping a close eye on things, and, you know, nothing's ever perfect. You know, we're a
No.
human business, but, you know, for the most part, as long as communications are open, people are assuming good intentions, and,
Yeah.
and we work together. I saw that happen last summer, and
Yeah.
improvements were made, and I expect this summer things will go even smoother.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it was good.
Any further questions for Charles about the facilities request? Nope. Is there a motion?
I will happily make a motion to accept the Middletown Theater contract for the summer of 2023 and welcome Amy and her troupe.
Ally.
Yeah.
Ally,
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry.
Meg. Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you, Tim. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you.
That's exciting.
All right. Old business. We are revisiting the 2023-24 Superintendent of Schools proposed budget.
Right, so, I shared with you tonight a memo, right, and a recommendation. So I took your feedback from our, last Thursday's budget meeting, and what Stephanie and I have done now is, we've addressed the, addition of I will call this proactive paraprofessional at Valley. So we've removed the 10-month administrative assistant to support athletics assistant principal Director of Curriculum Instruction and Technology, and instead are going to earmark those funds to have a paraprofessional working proactively at Valley View to start the year, knowing that eventually that paraprofessional is going to assume responsibilities for helping students with accommodations and modifications outlined in an IEP, right? So you can see the two differences there, you know, the 35,000 for the administrative assistant versus the 25,000 for the paraprofessional. Now, if you subtract those two amounts, that leaves us with the money, the $14,374 difference there. My suggestion there is, let's now, as we go through the spring, engage the Teachers Association and the Personnel Committee in a discussion about how we could potentially create some stipend positions, as we've done in the past, to support athletics, and also potentially work with Eric to see if we can, you know, have some support from our technician, our intern. So I think that this is a good compromise. I think it meets multiple needs with limited resources, and that's what we do, right? I mean, I think that was a pretty good discussion, and I certainly respect and support everybody's input on that, and I think that was responsive, though there was no vote taken to what I inferred, what I sensed was the wishes of the board. Okay. The second thing I'm happy to report is on Martin Luther King Day, just yesterday, we got the email that Stephanie and I wait for with bated breath each year, and as you know, we put a placeholder amount of 4%, and you can see the dollar amount increase in our budget for an insurance increase. The premiums have been pretty good this year. You know, much better this year than years past, and as a function of that, the rate increase is going to be 3% next year, not 4%. Right. So that's a difference of $77,470. Right. So that's wonderful. That's to our benefit. So what we could do with that $77,470 is either reduce the budget number by that amount, right? Or my recommendation is, instead of reducing it by that amount, if you remember from my presentation, and Dylan has it queued up, I can pull it back up here, but I don't necessarily need to unless you want me to get us from the 6.04% to the 3.98, in that bulleted list of cuts I made, you'll remember one of them was an FTE teaching position that I put as TBD, right? And if you'll remember how I described that was, it's a placeholder. You know, it's $57,000 or so that Stephanie and I were just looking at a dollar amount that, if we needed to, we would cut a position in the spring once we saw course requests and enrollment, and make that potentially difficult decision later. I didn't want to identify that position now, but kick the can up, so to speak. This premium difference allows me to not have to kick the can on that. So it's my ask that, you know, we don't reduce the budget amount by that amount, but instead not reduce the position. Is everyone understanding that?
Yes, absolutely.
So again, the way I would frame this is, as a reminder to everybody, my recommended budget now that we've taken out the administrative assistant includes no new positions, no new certified or classified positions. As a matter of fact, it's a net reduction now of 3 paraprofessional positions and 1.4 FTE teaching positions. So there's no new positions. As a matter of fact, there are reductions in staff that reflect declines in student enrollment at the high school, right? And understanding that the paraprofessional number, as we've talked sort of at length about, is always subject to special education needs, and you know, in some cases we don't have a control over that, as those are documented in binding expectations throughout individuals' education plans. So that's where we are. I can stop there, answer any questions. Otherwise, at the end of all this, the recommendation remains the 3.98% increase, and the total dollar amount is at $23,658,317. For those of you who are new, that's my superintendent's budget. That really is just a superintendent's budget, right? It doesn't really become meaningful until it becomes the board budget, which you guys then vote on, right? And as soon as it becomes the board budget, that's what ends up going forward to the town and through the process.
I have one follow-up question. If you could just explain a little more the reasoning between maintaining your one full-time employee math reduction, but not keeping the other reduction that you're doing away with. I did a bad job of explaining that.
Yeah,
But
I
I think
understand.
but I think you're following.
Yeah, so-
And the reason I'm asking is, as we looked at Eric's report from December, we saw a dip in the math performance of, I believe, 7th and 8th graders who are now going on to the high school.
Mhm.
So knowing that that's an area of need, I'm just curious to hear a little more of your logic.
Yep, and I'm just looking for my document. So I just need to remind everybody that the high school enrollment has dropped pretty significantly. You know, we're from a peak a couple of years ago, we're down about 85 students, right? Fewer students. So the reduction from 5 math teachers to 4 math teachers will bring the math department into alignment with the English and the science department, both of which have 4 FTE teachers. You know, English is a 4-year requirement, there are 4 teachers, science 4. This will bring math into alignment with it. It will not mean the elimination of any courses. What it will mean is that some of our existing courses will increase in class size. Ms. Lawson did an analysis for me. The class sizes won't increase to the point where it's unreasonable. You know, I gave you the numbers last time, and I'd be happy to share them with you again if I can find them. But the increased class sizes to somewhere around 18 to 20 students in algebra and geometry, and slightly higher in statistics and some of the higher level courses. I see that as reasonable. And again, these are the difficult decisions we make to bring in, I think, a reasonable budget request. That's was kind of our thinking about that. You know, those are the tough calls we make. And I'm just gonna keep looking through my papers here, because I know it's in here.
I recall that.
Yeah.
So.
I think it was
Okay.
20 to 25 on statistics.
I found it in your slides, but it didn't have the numbers,
Yeah, and I've
the
got
class
it.
size numbers. I think you had that separately maybe.
It did increase class sizes, but not to an unreasonable level.
Mhm.
I think we're still gonna be in good shape. And as far as the TBD position, I don't wanna say that was an imaginary number, but if you'll remember when I was talking to you about it, the complicated thing is the budget winds blow in all different directions. You know, a big unknown was the insurance, which is now a known. Other unknowns are things like what our open choice enrollment is gonna be, what our kindergarten enrollment is gonna be. You know, there are many other things that will factor into the final number. So while we identified it as an FTE cut, what Stephanie and I were really saying is that's $57,000 to $60,000 as a placeholder that we have to either fill with revenue or cut from something. And if necessary, it would be a teaching position if, you know, for example, if kindergarten enrollment came in at 70 students, we wouldn't need 5 FTE, we'd need 4, right? That type of thing. But, you know, this gets us out of that position of having to make that tough decision, right? But we're always gonna make, you know, complicated decisions. It's just, that kind of won't be hovering over us. Gives us that breathing room.
Thank you.
I have the numbers if you need them.
Oh, dude, great.
So algebra was, class size 15 to 19. Geometry was 13 to 20. Algebra 2 was 13 to 17. Statistics was 13 to 25. And trig was 14 to 22.
Right. So again, while larger, I don't see those as over the top, you know, unmanageable ones. And again, that's reflected in the declining enrollment.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, you know, you stood up here and said of all the cuts you had to do, you felt very strongly that administrative position should be in there. And then when the push came to shove with no money, you found an alternate, which I don't think is we haven't figured that out. It's kind of like you're gonna try to figure it out. Now we find some money and it's off the table. I don't get that.
You mean the 10-month administrative assistant?
Correct.
look, I heard the board, right?
But we had no money.
Well, what I think I heard was, we would rather see, instead of earmarking funding for an administrative assistant, earmarking money for at least one, but really as many as we could get, up to 3 to 5, which is where Jessica was, kindergarten paraprofessionals. Right? You know, without taking a vote, that was the sense I got, and I respect that. You know, I think that, you know, the conversation was, hey, that's more of a student-facing support, as opposed to, not that administrative assistants aren't enormously helpful and beneficial, but we as a board are really prioritizing those individuals who are working directly with students, which a paraprofessional is by definition.
But that's when we didn't have the money. Then you found some money. That's what my point is. I want to address that.
Yeah, so I think what I hear you saying is, now that we have this 77,000.
And wrap into that, why don't we go to 3 paraprofessionals and not do the teaching?
Those are all good questions. My recommendation tonight would be, I think we have miles to go before we sleep, right? I know we've got to get this budget through the Board of Selectmen, we've got to get this budget through the voters, right? I don't think we're done, right? We haven't ever been done, right? I mean, this is our, let's put forward a board budget that has the resources now here to make some of these more finite decisions as we go through the spring, and the revenue picture as well as the expense picture comes more into focus. We may have more, like, for example, if we do a great job in hiring and go hire all bachelor step 1 teachers, where Stephanie put in a master's step 7 placeholder, we may have additional places to potentially look for that administrative assistant. But I'm not going to authorize the hiring of that position until the board is comfortable with me doing so, which may not come until after the board hears we have additional, maybe up to 3 paraprofessionals in place.
It would be a future request to the board, once we,
100%.
over this, you know, looking towards next summer, once we have a more complete picture of how we finish this year and what things are looking like next year, we'll have a better sense of kindergarten registration numbers, all those things. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, Dave, to your answer, to be specific, would I recommend that we take that $77,000 that's in the budget because of the lower insurance premium and put it towards an administrative assistant? My answer right now is no. Let's put it towards that teacher I have to cut, which is kind of hanging out there. But in the future, if the budget winds blow in our direction, let's get back to it. I think, and I know Eric and Frank and Kate appreciated hearing, hey, we support the position, but we have to prioritize other things first.
That was my second question. Okay. Is we know the Board of Selectmen is probably going to come back and push for a lower number. Is this position the first one that's going to go if the number has to come down?
Let's see what the number is. I think that, you know, once it becomes the board's budget, I think we now need to vocally go out and advocate for that number. Knowing, you know, the process is what the process is, and you know, Stephanie and I, if we have to sharpen our pencils back up, we will do so. I hope we don't have to. I mean, I'm very confident saying to this community, you don't have to read the newspaper, see what other superintendents are coming in with, right? I mean, look around the state, and you know, 3.98% is probably the lowest I've seen out there, right? You know, it really is. It's something, and you know, it's a reflection of the inflationary environment we're in, and all new contracts that we've negotiated, right? It's a reasonable, a really reasonable budget, and I think it's important for us to remind everybody, the budget, as now amended, includes no new positions and actually cuts positions to reflect decreases in enrollment, which is something I think people have been asking us. Do you cut budgets when enrollment goes down? Yes. So this is a really reasonable, fair budget, and I am absolutely prepared to champion it should it become the board's budget.
I just think it's important to continue to note that the cost basis that we'll be working with next fiscal year when we create a budget is actually 4.84%, which is the actual increase, because we're applying $200,000 of one-time money to that, so,
Which will not be an option next year.
which I suspect it won't be. So,
Except that, if that's made up by a $200,000 increase in our ECS, fund,
Right.
which we don't know yet.
one could
Which is an
only pray.
unknown.
Which is, our
Wouldn't that be
fingers
amazing?
crossed, our cliff might resolve itself. If the legislators heard, we superintendents petitioning them
Yeah.
to hold us harmless, or they remove that cap on special education funding, or they fund us with mental health support, or other revenue streams open. So,
But that benefit, that increase, if it were to occur, would be based on the inflation we're dealing with now and go into next year. So we would already be chipping into what would be granted to us to help us out next year, would kind of evaporate, and we'd be, it'd still be good.
yeah.
It's a
right.
great thing, but it's really, it's a limited leg up from the deficit position we put ourselves in at that point. I just wanted to point that out. I don't wanna
No,
rub
it's
it
a
in.
good
I think you
point.
guys have done an excellent job putting together a budget, and I don't wanna criticize that, but that weighs heavy on me.
I would agree, Tim, and I think it's a point that's well made, that, you know, that moving forward, understanding that we are choosing to apply that 200,000 from the ESSER funds, that we have to do it with our eyes wide open and know what that means for next year. So it's worth saying again and again.
Do you want me to repeat that? I can-
That's right. We'll make that- we'll make
Thank you,
that
I appreciate that.
Are there questions for Charles about the memo that he provided about the adjustments that he's recommending?
I think it's fair, and I appreciate that, we're putting students first and prioritizing that at this time with, other ideas and thoughts for down the road.
Yeah, other comments?
I would just add that I think it would show a good faith effort on the part of the board to mitigate that hole we built into next year if we were to use that. I think, is it 70,000 or 77? What was the number?
Yeah,
We just-
77,470.
77, so if we were to use some or all or some portion of that to help reduce what we're putting into one-time funds for this year. I know that wouldn't help, put another teacher in the classroom or another student-based, but it would help to project forward a notion that we are looking seriously at understanding what we're asking for from the town to fund the school system. And that we see we have some we suddenly have of savings in healthcare, and rather than say, all right, well, that reduces our overall number, we're just gonna roll that back in and continue to go forward with the same increase that we're looking for. That's my only other comment.
So are you suggesting that we would reduce that from the ESSER funds that we were
We
looking
could,
to put
well,
in?
we would reduce it from
$23.
3.98%.
From the 3.98%.
Yeah, well, it would come off that, which would also change, if we applied it towards the ESSER funds, it would also decrease that number to 3.98. It wouldn't matter, because well, actually, it would, you're right.
Yeah.
It would.
Yeah, but then if we were to apply that back and reduce the overall increase that we're asking for by that amount, or some portion of it, it does provide us with the opportunity to demonstrate that, since we know now these expenses went down based on the budget that was presented, that there is some money there that we could eliminate.
I guess my question is, do we present it and wait to see what we're gonna be asked to do again? And then is that our
That's your
plan
card.
B? Is that our, you know, I don't know. This is only my second year. This is
Right.
harder than it was last year, for sure.
is.
And so I don't know. I know what's gonna happen at the next step, so.
I think,
Well, we
Stacy, I'm
don't-
agreeing with you that with so many unknowns, including what happens at the next level of budget debate, in my mind, Charles has walked us through in a very thorough way everything that was stripped out of the initial requests, the second, you know, the multiple levels of cuts and reductions that have happened in order to get us to this point. And being able to restore that one teaching position that we didn't even know where it was gonna come from, that was potentially going to be a very uncomfortable place for us to be in, to figure out where to reduce that teaching position. I feel comfortable leaving that, I feel much more comfortable leaving that teaching position in our budget request, knowing that we may very well be facing additional cuts in the future.
Well, I
So-
think the budget is fair, and it's a bare bones budget. We've reduced, and that 77,000 is a gift, and if we have to reduce, we know that we can reduce 77,000, but I don't think we should do it tonight. I think we should present it as a 3.98, and know that we have that card in our hand if we need to. But I think if you cut, and then you go in with a barer bone budget, and they say, take another 100,000, where's it gonna come from?
Mhm.
And so I think we're better off saying, this is a fair, bare bones budget, this is what we need to operate the schools in 2024, and, please honor our request and
Yeah.
see where it goes.
I think it's worth saying too, that 3.98%, I mean, it appears to be a larger request than we've made in recent years, but the truth of it is, when you look at what that $900,000 increase is, 600,000 of it is funding our outplacements that are necessary and that are a legal obligation for us, and the other 300,000 is covering insurance premium increases and contractual staffing salaries that we all went through this process last year. These are increased salary increases that were much deserved, and again are contractually based. But that eats up that entire increase and then some.
And then
It's important to note that it looks like 3.98%, but we're talking about a budget where we saw everything that was removed. We're asking our teachers and our administrators to do more with less.
Yep.
Even with this budget where we're asking for a 3.98%. So I think we have to be really clear about what that pays for, and I feel very comfortable going to our Board of Selectmen with a 3.98% and saying, this is why we need this.
Yep.
And going to our community and saying, this is why we need this, and hoping that they will support it.
Yep, agreed.
Are there additional comments, thoughts?
For those that haven't been around 6 years, Tim and I can remember when we had 0%
Yeah.
increase years.
We were all there.
Yeah.
2.5,
Yeah.
it was.
Right. And it's worth saying that in some ways, we're still making up for that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I don't know what we do.
Yeah.
And there'd be a nuclear option in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, you made a good point. It comes down to the voters, because if you remember, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, it failed, and we got the information out there to the key stakeholders and got them to vote, it passed. Everybody takes it for granted, these referendums, like, why bother? But they're very important. That's gonna be the biggest part of this, is
It is.
getting people to vote for it.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the equation is the fact that we are looking at overall cost over a longer period of time and trying to reduce and save money and also provide high-quality education with high-quality staff. So, I think, it's gonna go hand in hand, but, I'm very comfortable with the 3.98. I could vote for that tonight.
I'm gonna go down the line and see if there are final thoughts. Sarah?
No final thoughts.
Tim?
I would just say, I wish I could support this, and I appreciated you providing the opportunity to have one more meeting before we voted on it, and I, without going into tremendous detail, I just think that, I think you've done a really fabulous job, Charles, putting together a budget, and you've done the best, quite a bit with what you have to work with. I just can't support the one-time funding, and I don't know, I don't have the answer to what, the exact elements that need to change in the budget, but I do think it needs to be a smaller number, so.
Dave?
I mean, I've been through this so many years, it is a fluid back and forth process, so I'm totally on board with, let's kick it off and then see where it goes, and then whatever the number is, Charles does a good job of managing his needs within that.
Kim? Stacy?
I can support, I don't like the cliff, but I can support this as a starting point.
Meg?
I've already said my piece. I support it, and it's a fluid situation, and we'll do our best to present it to the public so that they know where we're going, and I think it's a good budget.
All right. If there are no further questions, then I think that we are probably ready for a motion.
Well, I'll make a recommendation to the Portland Board of Education to adopt the Portland Board of Education budget in the amount of $23,658,317.00, representing a 3.98% increase to the of the 2022-23 adopted budget.
Thank you, Meg. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Tim. All right. It passes. There we go. It is now the Board of Education's budget, and it will go to the you are the superintendent. It will go to the Board of Selectmen and to the community, and it's our job now as the Board of Ed to support our budget and to talk to people about why this is our budget.
Yeah.
Can I ask a favor, though? I think I lost my calendar of the next steps on this whole budget process when we go to do our thing
Oh,
before
right.
the.
Yeah, we have the calendars. Trish, do you have that there? When is our workshop with the Board of Selectmen? I can,
That's right, yeah, our workshop.
15th.
because we had a
Top of my head.
scheduling challenge. We had to,
Oh.
Yeah.
our night of the budget
You
was
don't have to do it
actually.
now, I just, if you could send something out that reminds
Yeah.
me of the dates.
Yes.
I believe it's March 15th.
I have, no, I don't have.
Did they make the
Usually that's
capital,
usually a Board of Ed.
did they make the capital meeting yet either? Do we know?
I don't know about that. I know that we had a conflict with our Board of Ed meeting, so I believe that our budget workshop will be March 15th, so that we can hold our regularly scheduled Board of Ed meeting on the 21st. But I imagine that those dates will be coming out.
I was
from
gonna
the
say, yeah, we can
Selectmen's
get
office,
those.
and you
Yeah,
can
we
circulate those.
got them and Trish caught an error. I went back and we fixed one thing, so I see her looking now. I'll tell you what, we'll
Okay,
email it to you, we'll get
You
it.
got, yeah, you'll send that out.
That sounds good.
Excuse me.
All right. Well, it's been a lengthy process over the last couple of weeks with that, and for you for months, so it's nice to be able to move forward. And we are gonna move forward to our committee reports. Curriculum has, we've actually just canceled our January meeting, we're gonna meet in February. Policy.
Policies meeting on the 25th, I believe, next week.
Personnel, we'll be meeting next week as well. Buildings and grounds.
Is meeting the 19th on 11 o'clock, I believe, on Thursday.
Great. Correct?
Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, if I could, I'll be there.
Board of Selectmen.
Two things. First of all, they thank the CERT people and the fire department for the warming center at the high school.
Oh, great.
And the second kind of a thing that's not really relatable, but it is, maybe Charles can use this. One of the selectmen said that they should be proactive in tree trimming in budget dollars rather than having to react. So you may be able to pull that in as a, a parallel statement.
It's so much easier to reach those branches when they're out of the ground.
that's right.
Active.
It's a prevention, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Committee on Solidarity.
They had their meeting, I haven't seen the next meeting that they have, frankly, I have to look at the schedule.
Equity and Inclusion Coalition. is,
on a brief hiatus, but they sent out, and I have to say, the survey was good. It was, it wasn't too long. I think the questions were well formulated, and hopefully it'll get the kind of response that you need to move forward. I thought it was quite good.
and the school facility study committee.
Meeting February 8th.
All right. And I believe we do not have a liaison to youth services at the moment. Audience of citizens. Is there anybody online who wishes to address us? Nope. All right. Board of Education member comments. Should we start over on this side this time? Dave, anything?
Nothing for me.
Kim?
No, I'm thankful for this budget process, for the openness and the collaboration.
No comments?
Nothing tonight. I'm gonna be headed to, but I am gonna go to Washington DC for the NSBA equity, presentation on Saturday, next Saturday, the 28th, and we're meeting with the, congressional contingent and, Dr. Cardona, education, secretary.
That's really
At some
exciting,
point.
Meg. Will you
It
be
is.
sure to update us on how that goes?
I sure will. Yep.
That's great. Sarah?
No comments.
Two things. One, the next Solidarity Committee meeting is February 20, I don't want to say it wrong, I want to make sure I got it right. February 21st, 7 o'clock, according to the schedule.
Okay.
And, and I would just ask, I know today, Charles, you guys included some more stuff at the last minute on the drive, on the Google Drive, where we get our stuff from it. And I know when Tricia added or updated stuff, we get an email about that to tell us. And I didn't know there was more stuff on, I try and make sure I read all that stuff in advance. And I would, not have had the opportunity, unless you sent something and I missed it. But when I looked down the drive, it wasn't there, and I actually had to refresh it, because I already had, if it's already open, you're not gonna see anything unless you refresh
Yeah.
the whole thing, and just as a point.
Yeah, some of the things come in fast and furious, like
Yeah.
yesterday's insurance premium, boom.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
but
yeah.
we can certainly email you those in more real time, so that, if you've read it Sunday, you wouldn't have seen the memo till today, because you get it, but I can do that for sure.
Yeah, just even a heads up to say, hey, recheck the drive, I
Recheck the
added
drive.
something to this folder.
Yep.
That's what Tricia had done, and that worked really well.
Good.
Yeah. All right. I don't think I have any additional comments, and we do not have an executive session on the agenda tonight, so if there is a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Tim. Is there a second?
I'll second, Meg.
All right, Meg. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Okay.
March 15th,
Thank you,
17th.
Tricia.
Where does it show up what?